Are we going live for the 99 and the 2000? Is this the appropriate one? Let me make sure and see. Because last time, the internet world was treating us dusty out here.
Oh, yeah, man.
But I kind of think I know what it was, though. To be fair, I have recently copped a 4K Apple TV, and they was watching TV in the room. So, with that being said, it was probably draining the goddamn Wi-Fi at the same time we trying to shoot in 4K. So, it don't necessarily pan out because he playing the game. It's all kinds of different stuff all on top of the jump. So I was like,
using too much of Bill Gates' internet.
But I got the strongest one though. Like I said, man, that jump. I think it's like 1 gigabit. So I was still surprised that. I mean, that's fair. Yeah. Because 4K take a lot of the stream out. But we back. We appreciate y'all again for coming through. It's another episode of Eavesdrop. Today we gonna be talking about the voting rights bill that everybody is up in arms about. That got people chirping about the filibuster. Got people talking about all different kinds of wins, losses. Some people think it's a win. Some people think it's a loss. We're going to discuss that today, which is why I put in the title, as y'all see here, is it a scam? Because over time, we've been seeing conversations about every 4 years, about every 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Voting rights come up again. It's something that I personally believe that, should be hammered down. Of course, in a one-time deal because it impacts everybody. But again, before we go ahead and get started, man, head over to gildedsages.com. Check out our new and latest article from our guy, Quan Poet. And what's it about, man? Man?
It's a look at the movie American Pie, but you're looking through it from the lens of toxic masculinity. So I go into how that movie really introduced us to a lot of stuff that we partake in now. Like, it was particular scenes that remind you of things like what we now have as OnlyFans, and how they used a lot of that video with the female to sort of influence a lot of what we do now today. And that was in the early 2000s. That was, 99, 2000? One of those. So they really set the precedent for, like...
It was a minute.
And I just talk about those things in that article. So definitely go over to the forums part of Gilded Sages and drop a comment. Let me know what you think about it. Do you see that link between American Pie and a lot of what goes on today?
Cool. So also shout out to me, because I'm now the ANC Commissioner 8D06. The work is just getting started. My bad. The work is just getting started. Hit that thing again. It's something that I've been putting off for a while now. Shout out to all the people who, asked and encouraged me to do it and let me know that I did have what it takes to be one. I sincerely appreciate it, because I'm going to need all of those same individuals. But I look forward to it, though. It's a little bit different because when I worked with ANCs the first time around, I worked with them being a moker, which is one of the mayor's representatives for the ward, and so
it was.
It made me feel some type of way. Not bad necessarily, but it wasn't something that I was super excited about. But because I do care about community in the way I do care about community, I think it's a necessary path and a necessary role to take on to actually, be a change agent. Because as you know, I don't believe that people who don't work shouldn't talk shit and shouldn't really, had a ability to speak on matters. You know what I'm saying? Because if you out here just sitting on the sofa, I mean, in most cases, people think it's, elitist or whatever you want to call it. But
facts. You gotta
say so.
You gotta eat what you kill out here.
Yeah. And shout out to, again, my DC Young Dems team. And shout out to Water Dems as well. As we brought in the new year. So we got some things coming as well on that end. And did you want to drop in anything else before I go ahead and get started and pull up this first bang of an article?
I'm always just shout out to the people that, anybody that's watching right now, anybody that's going to follow up and engage our platforms and everything. Just thank y'all because, again, you could be doing anything under the sun on a Saturday afternoon. But you here with us.
So thank you. We really love you. One day I'm going to be a singer. I bought the other day, and this is last thing. I bought the other day the R. Kelly Trapped in the Closet Jones. Only because, bro, when I tell you, when them Jones first came out, that shit had me walking around singing every single thing. Like, every word. Because you know how he just made the whole everything is a song. It's just like one super huge long song.
I know, right? You gotta do an eavesdrop one like that.
I was under the table. I went to the kitchen. And she started bitching. Hey, fire. You can say what you want.
Oh, man.
I don't support R. Kelly's actions, but that joint was fire.
That joint was fire. Hold you.
Yeah, man. All right, so let me go ahead bring this joint in. I'm gonna go ahead share the screen right here. Bring you back up. So, okay, hold on. We got one guest in the room. Hold on. Before we get started, fam, I want you to stay there for a second, Brian. Let me get through this article real quick for you. But so right now, what y'all looking at is the evolution of the voting rights in America, right? And so, as y'all can see, the Constitution took effect in the early 1789 after the first federal elections, right? It did not include an express protection of the right to vote, and it was left to the states to determine who was eligible to vote in elections. For the most part, state legislators generally limited voting to white males who owned land. Some states utilized religious tests to ensure only Christian men could vote. Gradually, a state legislator began to slightly expand voting rights to non-landowning white males. So keep that in mind as we are having these discussions, and when people talk about who does what and who has what, just keep in mind how we get into 2022. However, it was until 1870 when the 15th Amendment was ratified to the right to vote was drastically expanded, at least in the Constitution's text, by ensuring the right to vote could not be denied based on race. And although the 15th Amendment extended the right to vote to all citizens regardless of race, Native American people also were cast out of that based on the Snyder Act. Little by little, additional barriers were broken down and the franchise was extended to all groups of people. 3 additional constitutional amendments expanded the right to vote. The 19th Amendment ratified in 1920, so we're in the roaring 20s. We're just out of what I would call fake Reconstruction, because it never really happened. But it ensured the right to vote shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. So now we're talking about genders. The 24th Amendment, ratified in 1964, prohibited Congress and states from implementing a poll tax or any other type of taxes for federal elections. So, again, stay with us. We're talking about people who were given the right to vote, but at the same time, these rights were not necessarily comprehensive in a way that they were not protected because there were other methods and modes and means to undermine those rights, which there still are, still to this day. And so after that, and the 26th Amendment, ratified in 1971, stated no citizen at least 18 years of age or older may be denied the right to vote on account of age. Despite the forward progress over time, expanding the franchise did not come without pushback. Some state legislators implemented strategic policies such as poll taxes and literacy tests to reduce voting among people of color, Native Americans, and immigrants in low-income populations. I would argue that those were Yeah, I'm not going to get into that right now. But I would just say that as we get here, understand that a lot of people adopted whiteness and got out of those modes and methods and means that were used to thwart other groups, black people specifically. The act was designed to make sure that state and local governments can no longer pass laws or policies denied to citizens to right to vote based on race and other immutable characteristics. I'm gonna stop there because we do have a guest in the green room, and I do want to bring him in really quickly. As we start this discussion off, we don't usually have guests on the first part, but Brian is a great guy, avid supporter. He took his mic off the first time. Let me see. Let me get you up here. Let me assign you to the guests. Go ahead, cut this off here. Boop, 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 boop. Guess, hold on. Is your camera on, fam? All right. And so, yeah, your camera on. I assigned you to guest one. Can you handle that? So right now we're talking about the history of Voting Rights Act.
So for me, when it comes to the history of the Voting Rights Act, and when it comes to this part in particular, as far as the actual John Lewis, the act, I believe it's HR 4.
Yeah, it's HR 4.
Yeah, HR 4. For me, there's always a theme when we talk about politics and how it plays out in the black community. A lot of us went out and we voted en masse for President Biden. He promised our community and a lot of other communities a lot of different things. He has not delivered on a lot of those different things. And I hear all of the things that are positive in the voting rights bill. I hear those things. I do agree that those things need to be dealt with. But what my fear is that this is what the win is going to be for the black community. And if you're telling me that Black America exchanged our votes to put a man in president just for us to get a Voting Rights Act out of it, I would collectively call that an L.
All right, so we got Brian, and I'm gonna wait till he unmute his mic. It's saying that because it's telling me you muted yourself, so you gotta unmute yourself. There you go. Hey, Brian, how are you doing today? Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. Let me see, because I don't want it to give feedback. But you muted yourself again. Go ahead.
I thought you was about to. I thought y'all was about to talk.
Nah, you can't. Because we done already started the discussion. We done talked about the history of voting rights. If you coming up, the rule is you gotta be able to drop something. So we talking about voting rights today, and I would just like to hear, what your opinion is specifically. We only at this point touch the history of it, but what you feel about the debacle and everything that's going on and the discussion that's going on around as it relates to the voting rights bill, the 2022 amendments specifically.
Oh wow.
Well, they got to hurry up because they gonna lose the majority. So they whatever they do, they need to hurry up and do it. Honestly, really, honestly, I know that's not. I know we got to stay on topic, but it's other stuff we need to worry about, like people, um, like the jobs, and then there was some other stuff too, like really that really is going on out here. Like people, they starting to feel their worth out here, and it's hard out here. You know what I'm saying? I'm still
Mm-hmm.
working. You know what I'm saying? Through this bad pandemic, I only had a month off, and yeah, every time somebody else gets sick, then two or three people got to work 3 or 4 shifts and have one day off. That's really honestly, that's really, and who am I? I'm just one out of 300 million people,
Mm-hmm.
but. That's probably the main thing besides voting rights. Even here in Georgia, how they did the new law last year. But I think we had a successful election this go round. It wasn't allegedly no cheating, stuff like that.
You said
It was
allegedly.
pretty much Republican driven. Well,
So
yeah, it was no Republican input. You know what I'm
so
saying? But I
yeah,
thought the elections were good.
that's the point that Quan was making in the sense that at this immediate moment that the voting rights bill isn't necessarily a priority in the sense that it is the most devastating or impeding thing to the black community right now for it to be pedestalized in a way that is considered a win for the group. And so I agree with that. I don't necessarily have any reservations about that particular point because I do think that, like I said initially, that people and the voting rights bill, as it matriculated through, should be something that should be written in a way that shouldn't have to be amended every so often based on the demographics or based
It
on
shouldn't be
the.
permanent.
Hmm?
Yeah, like we shouldn't have to be renewing the right every 5 years and 10 something like that. I never could understand that. Why are we renewing this?
Because when you
So,
when you and the reason I wanted to do the deep dive or go back to the actual beginning of it, because I want when people talk about voting rights and look at voting rights, to understand that when you're talking about a bill that was written in its natural form, or in its initial without the amendments and that came along throughout the way. We're looking at a piece of legislation that was, like many others, meant to appease a specific group of people that had loopholes, that were designed to be able to be loopholed in the sense that, again, you could create poll taxes, you could create literacy tests. At this point in time, I didn't source an article today for the conversation, but when you talk about gerrymandering and you talk about how the courts, the highest courts, this SCOTUS, have ruled to the fact that there isn't anything that we should do to address this matter because it's a political matter and we want to keep our hands out of political matter, when we all know that gerrymandering is a way and a tactic to undermine the voting power of residents, even when you do vote, because of how your jurisdiction is actually positioned and how those votes are counted.
And it's bipartisan. So it's not even like one does it and the other doesn't. It's bipartisan. Whoever wins takes all in those situations. So the fact that either party frames it as an issue that only one party does is laughable. If you know anything about history, it's been done on both sides.
What you talking about in terms of gerrymandering?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
It's been done on both sides. If you study the maps of certain states throughout a 60-year history, whoever won the majority, whether it was a Democrat or Republican, they gerrymandered the state however they wanted to with impunity. So I don't understand why we're even doing that whole thing of painting one over the other when that's been a practice that both parties use throughout the years?
I think the discussion continues to come up only because
Republicans are doing it now.
not even just that Republicans are doing it now. I think it goes into, matter of fact, what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna go ahead, take you off the screen for a real quick hot second, just so we can bring up this next article that I wanted to touch on, that talks about like Joe Biden and what he wants to do at this particular point as it relates to voting rights. And so what I'm gonna go ahead and do is bring that up for everybody. Let me see. This is from can everybody see that? No, I don't think you all can. Let me pull this up, share this screen with everybody. Hold on. Primary display. All right, there we go. Let me move this. Here we go. All right. So as y'all can see right now, the title of this is "With Legislation Stalled, Biden Will Speak in Atlanta on Voting Rights." I don't know if you are you from Atlanta, Brian?
Yes.
All right. So Brian is from
I
Atlanta.
think he's next week, right?
Yeah, I'm about to get into it. Because this is written on January the 5th. So it says he will be joined by Vice President Kamala Harris, who is leading the administration's push for voting access. I don't know if y'all caught it prior to early in the year. They pushed out some funds for people who would help with voter information. Not voter information. I forget the technical. No, it's not even voter registration, but it was basically some monies and some funds that went out based in and around like TikTok. All of these creators who would be able to bring people up to speed on voter. I'm gonna use information for the lack of a better word because it's to inform the voters on the voting process, for lack of a better word. But President Biden will deliver a speech in Atlanta next week that will focus on the urgency of passing the voting rights legislation and will condemn a swath of state-level efforts to limit access to the ballot box as an attack on fundamental constitutional rights, the White House announced on Wednesday. I'm going to jump down a little bit. Mr. Biden has been under pressure to further address an issue he framed as an integral promise of his presidency. Democrats' voting rights bills have stalled in the Senate, where Republicans have blocked them using the filibuster, which is why I brought and wanted to bring this article up, because you spoke on something that both sides do as it relates to part of the legislative process, political process, etc. Senator Chuck Schumer, Democrat of New York and Majority Leader, has set a deadline of January 17th for Republicans to drop their opposition or face political vote to change filibuster rules. But two centrist Democrats have resisted any attempt to muscle through a rules change, leaving their party short of the votes necessary to do so. I'm going to skip down a lot bit more. Y'all should go check this article out. It is from the New York Times. Senate Democrats have recently intensified their efforts to push forward on two pieces of stalled voting rights legislation. One bill, the Freedom to Vote Act, which I have, along with the other one, will create nationwide standards for mail-in and early voting, among other provisions. The Freedom to Vote Act, though, I actually am in favor of more, and I wouldn't even say in favor of, but it's something that I think that would be more impactful right now. And then the other one is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, Advancement Act, which is largely in a bill of amendments. And it's a landmark law that was stripped of its key anti-discrimination enforcement mechanisms in 2013. We're going to go into that. Taken together, the two bills will completely turn things around, the voter suppression measures and the schemes to sabotage elections outcomes. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. because what I wanted to touch on, they actually made a very, very good point at that last one, talking about the actual schemes used to undermine elections. And I wanted to touch on that piece because I think it's very important that we have a discussion about what that actually looks like and what that actually means. Because when we talk about elections and when we talk about undermining elections, I want people to understand that there's an informal space in how people actually undermine elections. And what do I mean by that? I think that the bill in good faith works, but I think that without discussing those informal pieces around how people can influence elections and outcomes, as we've seen within our own Democratic primary, where we had people drop out as a result to, undermine Bernie Sanders, or when we look back, maybe, I want to say 2 election cycles ago. No, the last 2 election cycles. Donna Brazile outright got caught cheating for Hillary Clinton. And so what I would want to see is a step further in terms of how we are addressing these quote-unquote means and mechanisms to undermine. Because to your point, I think that I would agree largely in that when we talk about even the filibuster, which is the main reason why I wanted to bring that to the forefront, is that the filibuster, I personally don't believe that ending the filibuster would change anything. I think that it would just spiral out and you would get both factions continuing to up the ante. Because, as we have seen, Republicans are going to stand 10 toes tall. They are ruthless in their politics. I do not believe that if the Democrats were to take a step further, that the Republicans would not jump over that step and then Democrats would take heed. Because the trajectory and the pattern that I've seen, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, is that Democrats play to the base of the Republican voters, the swing voters, as well as they are courted by the same, what people would call elite class or funding class. So when you have a discussion about, undermining all of these different components, I think that the discussion has to go a little bit further. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. Tell me what you think in regards to the actual ability to do so or ability not to do so, and how it would help.
For me, when it comes, here's the thing. For me, when it comes down to voting, right, I want people to understand that we have to engage policy a little bit better than just what the surface gives us. We see this every day in DC, born and raised in DC. The only time politics engages the black community is when it's time for anything voting. And for me, what this bill smells like when it's presented to me is that this administration, just like every other administration in my lifetime, the only time they want to deal with the black community is when it's framed around how can we get black people's votes? How can we make voting better for black people? Not how can we make the lives of black people better? Not how can we improve the conditions in which black people live in better? It's how can we give black people more access to vote? And it's so disingenuous because voting, as any astute politician will tell you, is the end process of a whole system.
This is true.
In which you have to go out and engage.
On top.
Exactly. Voting is a results thing. But the way this thing is framed to our community is that voting is the whole process. You go out there and you vote. And we're going to give you this legislation so that you can give us your vote. In exchange for what? And as good as these things are, I would like to see them do something about gerrymandering. I don't think that's going to pass because, again, that's something that both of them use. And it's disingenuous for either one to call out either one on doing it. You could just look at a map of any state. Mm-hmm. If a Democrat won, it was sliced down to where the Democrats would hold that majority. You can look at Chicago. If a Republican run it, those cities get sliced up so that Republicans get voter advantages. For us to even argue anything other than that would be disingenuous at best, even with the filibuster. The Democrats, when they didn't have the majority of the power, filibustered every Republican legislation. As you see now, Republicans filibuster every Democratic legislation.
And I would push back on that. I think the problem is that the Democrats don't be filibustering enough. I think that they move, because the problem is Republicans be getting some wins.
Yeah.
And so I think that the problem is that they don't necessarily filibuster enough and use the same tactics and approach that the other side uses enough. And I think it goes in line and intact with, for me, I just personally believe that, you know, there's a lot of people who like to say they for the people, but aren't necessarily for the people. Mm-hmm. And so it shows in their politics. And so you get a lot of people who are now trying to, you know, push and act like this is going to be the next big thing. And it is not something that we should already have. I think that, you know, the American people, especially Black ADOS people should understand that this is something that you should have. Yeah. This is something that should not, and I want to say the American people at large, right? Only because what I want people to understand is that whether it be the informal disruption, because a lot of people want to talk about like Russia and all of these different components as it relates to election interfering, whether it comes down to the money, whether it comes down to the access, whether it comes down to all of these different components, I think that we have to be and get in a space where people understand that all of those things are election interfering. And that, like you said, the part of the problem is that a lot of people only participate in putting the cherry on top. And what you get is you get a bunch of people who, you know, I'm always a believer that if you vote just at the end and you got to run around and ask people who to vote for, I would much rather you not vote. And I say that because you are not an informed voter. And that's just as dangerous as voting just like
not voting.
You... I know a lot of people get, you know, upset about the term that came around, what was it, low information voter?
Oh, yeah. Man.
And the thing is, I'm not discouraging anybody from voting, but what I am saying is that it is dangerous to just vote on, because this is how we see these same issues coming up and about, because we get people who vote for, he got swag. So you got Eric Adams talking about swagging it out of COVID. Then you got people voting just because you're a woman or you black. So you got Kamala skiing through the White House. And people upset that she's not doing anything in particular. You got people who are your bleeding heart liberals who are now upset with Joe Biden when we all knew Joe Biden was a Dixiecrat from the start.
Yeah.
And so you have all of these different elements that people would like to vote for some people for, or like whether they're the same ethnicity as you or the same sexuality as you. All of those are cool. Don't get me wrong. But we have to get out of a space where a person can just come into the fold and throw it at you, and that's why you're going to vote for them. I would never, and this is me shooting myself in the foot, only because I want more informed voters. I would never want somebody to vote for me just because I'm a black man. I would never vote. I would never want somebody to vote for me just because I'm a black man.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Because guess what? We are also the same community, and this is our fathers who voted for a man just because he got on stage and played a saxophone. What is that? A saxophone was all it took.
Was all it took.
And he locked everybody in your mama up. Well, not the mamas, but the daddies up.
Kind of sort of the mamas too. Because I would say they got locked in Arrested Development.
Exactly.
In the sense that they were put in a position where they couldn't necessarily thrive. And so you got stuck in survival mode because you didn't have your men to be able to thrive. And so now we're in a community that's on dissension because the survival state has been in a perpetual situation. But now since the economy is such an influx, we are now seeing a group that's descending into just utter chaos because the prison rates, again, which is something else that I don't think that is being addressed at a large enough scale, and some people have pushed back. Here in DC, they made the point to give back voting rights to the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated who may have had felonies.
Yeah.
That has been made in DC, but I think in other places that we should think about passing legislation of similar sort. And I say that because, we've sat on here, we've had the conversations about how I feel about, possibly holding people accountable who have done damage to our communities in the sense of, selling drugs and killing and doing all of these crazy things. But I do think that people should still have the ability to vote, because though you did those things, and I think that there should be an accountability as it relates to those actions and the outcomes of those actions. I'm not going to sit here and say that those men and women who are incarcerated are stupid and are devoid of politics, because let's be honest, a lot of those people who were high up rankings, like the people love, like the Big Meeches and the Frank Lucases and even Tony Lewis, I'm sure was politically connected back in those days. Yeah. Because even when we look out in Chicago, all those people, what was it? Larry Hoover, they just did the concert for him. Yeah. I'm sure he was politically connected.
Jeff Ford, he was connected with the Black Panther movement.
All of those people.
But here's my only pushback, though. Notice how they bypass so many other different things and go straight for political. So we're not going to fix the conditions in the prisons for these people who are dealing with COVID in the prisons.
And the conditions in the community that may prevent a person from being an informed voter, a voter that they're scared of.
Exactly.
That's a different.
We're not going to do any of those things. We're just going to extend you the grace of being able to vote. It's like, fuck whatever humanity that you have to deal with, but we'll give you everything under the sun when it comes to voting. You want this? We got you. You get all this legislation you want as long as we only dealing with you for your votes. And that's how it's been. Because they know you put a person with a saxophone in front, you're going, like, think about our lifetime and what we have done with our votes. Mm-hmm. A man with a saxophone won our vote. A man who was just black won our vote. A man that told us we weren't black if we didn't vote for him won our votes. That's all it took. That's 3 presidents.
That's crazy. Tell us we weren't black.
So one was had black and we voted for him. Then one of them told us we weren't black if we didn't vote and we voted for him. So why wouldn't you just say, hey, let's keep this pumping. Let's make sure that we make it as easy as possible. Because it don't take nothing.
Yeah.
It don't take nothing. Like, at the trajectory that we going, you going to have a presidential candidate drop a rap album. And that's going to get our vote. Like,
they said Kanye for president. And the thing about it is, you know me, I like Kanye West's music. I'm not going to say I bang with Kanye. Because I think Kanye West is a very spastic character in the sense that I don't necessarily feel as though he's consistent enough for me to say I bang with Kanye. I think he's well intended, but I think that he's ignorant in a lot of ways that I would never, ever want him to be my president.
Yeah, he borderline on disrespect. I don't like how he.
Yeah, and it's just certain things that should not be. But I'm gonna go ahead and bring up the Freedom to Vote Act.
All right.
Just to give people a brief summary, so everybody who's watching, you could come away with something, because I try to be helpful and informative, and not just sitting up here talking out the side of my neck. But this is the Freedom to Vote Act. And so as you see, as I get down here, this is historic legislation to strengthen American democracy, promote racial justice and equality for all Americans. In the wake of 2020 election, an unprecedented wave of restrictive voting laws and election sabotage efforts are taken in the states, with likely to more to come this year. We're also, and also, just to let everybody know, this is on the cusp of midterms too. So I don't want, because I see a lot of stuff going on. Like I saw Joe Biden put student loans on until like May. Like, nah, he ain't for everybody watching. Houston, you have a problem. First off, ain't nobody got time for that, and then I don't even know what the other joint is, but he ain't letting them things go. So I'm gonna just go ahead. The early voting bill will require all 50 states to offer early voting periods for at least 2 weeks prior to election day. Luckily, DC, we here in DC, and they are, I will say, ahead of the game in that way. For at least 10 hours per day. And only be required to offer early voting during the elections, regular business hours. Each state will also be required to ensure that when possible, early voting polling places are within walking distance of public transportation, accessible to rural voters, and located on college campuses. I like that.
Yeah.
The mail voting, the bill would create a national standard permitting no excuse to vote by mail. For every eligible voter, states would be required to permit voters to apply for absentee ballots online and prohibit it from imposing onerous requirements like requiring mail ballots to be notarized. Apart from returning ballots by mail, the bill would allow voters to return mail ballots in person to a polling place or to a drop box. It also includes safeguards to ensure fair resolution and discrepancies between a voter's signature on a mail ballot and signature on a file with election authorities. That's super important because people be challenging stuff, and it takes so long that
the signature is off, and they find any little thing.
Man. Election day holiday. This bill would make election day a legal public holiday, making it easier for voters to get to the polls. I'm super indifferent about that part of it for the most part. Yeah, because I think if you gonna vote, you gonna vote. I think for me personally, I think if it's your prerogative to vote, you gonna find a way. But I'm not going to go as far, and the reason I'm indifferent is because I'm not going to be ignorant and go as far as saying that I don't know that people are in situations to prevent them from it. But I think for a majority of people, though, that you can vote if you want to. You can. Sorry. I get it. Because again, I get the rural areas and the places be put in situations, but I really and truly believe for people who are not in it, I don't believe that a larger amount of the population is in that position. Because even when we look at and I say that because even when we look at Democratic ran states, and let's say even Washington D.C. for example, it's a lot of people who just don't vote. Still. Even being registered, because even my thing is like voter registration only has but so much power because I can register to vote, but
getting people to,
I still got to vote, and that's why you got the whole Go TV, because and for everybody who don't, that's get out the vote basically. So it's a whole initiative around. Yeah, we know people register, but we gotta put and use social and political capital to also get people to actively come out and vote, which is a whole different ballgame. Protections for individuals with disabilities, I'm all for that. Because again, those are the type of people that I'm talking about. Like, that's you gotta get them squared away because they actually have a legitimate excuse.
Yeah.
Then voter validation. The bill would promote a national standard for the states that have an identification requirement for in-person voting and allow the use of wide range forms of identification, including electronic copies.
All right, let me
Go ahead.
Let me stop you right there. Listen. And this is the point of contention I have. At this point, anybody who tells me that black people, after all that we've been through in this country, we've been here for 400 plus years, that we have an issue with having an ID, I feel like that's highly disrespectful. It's highly disrespectful. Why do we still allow people to get up on national TV and run the narrative that black people are struggling to get identification to be able to vote? And we don't have any problem with that being put out there. No problem at all. It's like, well, yeah, we as a people, we do struggle with having an ID. I'm like,
I would agree.
It's disrespectful. It's disrespectful. No, it's disrespectful, bruh.
I agree.
How could you allow people to take the smallest fraction of our community who may not have an ID and paint over a broad brush that our community suffers specifically from people not having an ID being able to vote?
So your issue is that
that's not our issue.
Generalize it?
Yes, they generalize it. That is a small, in my opinion, it is a small few people in our black community that suffer from really not having that ID to be able to do that. That should not speak for black people as a whole and make it an issue that we now go out and sell to the whole world. Oh, the black community has an issue with an ID. No, the hell we don't. Most black people that we know, because we know you're not getting nothing. You can't even go in certain buildings. You can't get certain benefits without having your ID. You can't go party. You can't do nothing without your ID. We know black people from poor, rich, whatever. Most of us cannot function in society without having an ID. And every other politician alike to get up there and say, oh, well, the black community suffers from not having a valid ID in order to... No! That's a small fraction, and y'all are going to let these people co-opt that small fraction of people and paint the whole black community as we have an issue with not having the proper identification,
Would you say that
which is
about-
preventing us from voting in mass.
Would you say that about voting rights as a whole?
I think so. A lot of this stuff that they claim are black issues are not the issues of our community.
All right, so let's finish going through it. Though.
Finish.
I'm going to finish going through it. All right. So we at thwarting voter suppression. The Freedom Act to Vote take direct action to respond to overt voter suppression that blocks Americans' access to vote. The bill would prohibit the dissemination of false and misleading information designed to deter eligible voters from casting a ballot. It would also establish a federal criminal penalties for deceiving voters and allow the Attorney General to share accurate information about elections if state officials fail to do so. I would have to look at the actual bill to see the definition of what they mean by deceptive.
Probably like...
Because that's that right there. Hold on, I'm going to have to, because you eating up the time. Let me see. It says countering long lines and related discriminatory practices. The bill creates protections for individuals subjected to excessive lines on election day, most often black and Latino voters, by requiring states to ensure that lines last no longer than 30 minutes and restricting states from prohibiting donations of food and water to voters waiting in line. Yeah, that one right there is interesting. private right of action. The bill creates cause of action that allows voters to sue when their constitutional right to vote is infringed upon, preventing election sabotage. Voter suppression is extreme gerrymandering are themselves forms of election sabotage. But the Freedom to Vote Act also includes new specific protections to counter tactics that arose in 2021 from attacks on election officials to partisan election reviews, restriction on politicized removal of election officials and related safeguards. This bill would increase protections for local election administrators and help prevent them from being removed for partisan or political reasons. Interesting. So you are saying that you don't want somebody to be basically Donald Trump. The bill would allow officials administering federal elections to bring a lawsuit challenging their removal if they were replaced for reasons other than gross negligence. Neglect, duty, or malfeasance in office. These are a lot. I gotta look up these definitions. And when I say definitions, not the definitions in the Webster Dictionary, but when they do bills, like they got their own separate definitions
within the context of
enhanced protections of ballot records, remedy for failure to certify results, and then of course redistricting reform, modernizing voter registration, same day voter registration. That's clutch. Again, DC is ahead of itself. We got that. Online voter registration, protections against unlawful voter purges, then of course campaign finance reform. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is move that. But what you think about the freedom? So because we were talking about the John Lewis Act for the most part initially, what you think about the Freedom to Vote Act? I personally believe that one is more of the bang for your buck if we were going to be pushing, because those are two separate bills. Last time I checked, correct? Yeah. Those are two separate bills on two separate tracks. Yeah. And so I think that one should probably be pushed a little bit more. But I still think that it's, crazy and ill-advised that we are in a situation right now with the fact that we still haven't had these discussions as Americans. And again, I think it's because the bill was created, which is why I brought that up from jump. The bill was created to have loopholes in that sense. And again, Joe Biden, if I want to say, he was around during that time, right?
Which one? When the actual
65
might have been a young Joe
Biden, but a young Joe Biden is a worse Joe Biden.
Probably so. He might have just been getting out of college. Saying nigga before he eat his cornflakes, but what's up?
But So with all that being said, though, do you think it's a let me ask you this. I think the better question after reading all of that and going through all of that is how or why do you think it's scammy? Because I from hearing the conversation, I don't think either one of us thinks it's a scam at its core. But for example, I think it's a scam in the sense that it's going to be used as vote bait.
It's already being used as vote bait.
In the sense that it's something that people are going to point to. They're like, we got you voting rights. Like, even in the article, the way that it's framed is like, I'm going to go down here and go against these people to get you your voting rights. And it's like, sir,
how you going to get something that we already have?
And even if we don't, the question then becomes, why don't we have a substantial package that is infallible to loopholes?
Fam, my biggest thing with this whole thing is that what they're going to do is they're using our black history, right? They're using all of these things that we've done to get the voting rights. So they're going to use that, and they're going to taper that onto the fact that black people still have issues with identification and all of these other things. If you go through every piece of these things, okay, there are some inconveniences in certain areas, but if you follow the data, black people, our vote has always been infallible. We vote 90% plus for the Democrats. So I'm not seeing where the data matches the issue. Because rain, sleet, or snow, if it's a nigga blowing a saxophone, if it's a nigga running for office, or if it's a nigga telling us that we ain't a nigga if we don't vote for him, our black asses is going to get out there and we going to put that vote to work. So I'm not seeing where we need all of these different things as a black community in order to increase what? We already give them 90% of our vote. What more do they need? So my thing is they're going to paint this as a black issue when they know the data doesn't point to that, when really it's a who's coming into to America issue. Who's going to really have those issues with voter registration? Because we've been here for 400 years. You're not going to sit here and tell me that the majority of us are struggling with becoming registered voters. We've been here. We've been voting. The data doesn't show that. When we win, our black vote is 90% of their vote. When Democrats lose, our vote is 90% of their vote. Voter registration for us is not an issue. Our vote outperforms every other race, as a matter of fact, when it comes to the Democratic Party. So don't paint this as a black issue. What's really going on is you need to fast track a certain people who are coming in mass. And what this bill does is it fast tracks those people. And we know who those people are. So stop using black history. Stop insulting black people. Talking about we don't have IDs and we struggle with that. And we're not registered to vote because the data does not point to that. Go look at your polls for my lifetime.
So your issue is it's a scapegoat.
Yes, it's a scapegoat. We know who. You're making the registration easier for the influx of immigrants. Because most black people are registered to vote. Most black people have an ID. And even if the case wasn't that, if you look at the voting data, our vote carries the Democratic Party whether they win or lose. Everybody else votes however they want. So to even paint this as something that black people should even be entertaining is disingenuous at best. But they're going to use our history. They're going to bring up what we did for this, that, and the third, when at the end of the day, we know who this benefits.
So it says the number of black Americans eligible to vote for president has reached a record 30 million in 2020, with more than 1/3 living in 9 of the nation's most competitive states: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. A higher share than the 29% of all U.S. eligible voters who live in these states. Nationwide, black eligible voters now make up 12.5% of the U.S. electorate, up from 11.5% in 2000.
I rest my case.
Hold on, but Hispanics are at 32 million. It says for this year's upcoming presidential election, the Pew Research Center survey found that 63% of black registered voters are extremely motivated to vote. Furthermore, among those who support Joe Biden, over 35% said that they plan on casting or have already cast their vote by absentee or mail-in ballot. Okay. I would have to look at the numbers a little bit more.
Like I said, I rest my case.
But I do think that that's a fair assessment because voting rights. At this point, we just need our reparations. We just need the ability to be inserted into the economy the way everybody else has.
Exactly.
We just need protections in the same way that everybody else has received, in the sense that once we are violated, there has to be some type of consequence, a severe consequence, so that people understand that there should be no violations.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think that luckily, America is so wild and crazy that, you know, you got people who advocate against these type of bills because they don't understand that they affect them too. But that's the craziness of America. But we're going to end that discussion there. We appreciate everybody for coming out. We appreciate y'all for having us. Man, leave a comment, leave a like. Please share the video. Damn, I went through the whole video without telling people to share the video. Ain't that nuts? Yeah. But it is what it is. I do this because I genuinely, you know, like getting up here, sitting, talking about certain issues. So if you made it to the end, please like the video. Please share the video. We please definitely appreciate it. Please subscribe. Thank you. Please head over to GildedSages.com. Please check out Death of a Nigga Boy. Please check out the articles that this man's put so much time in, and have a discussion. Drop your own thread on our website, and we're gonna catch y'all another day. Again, on our website, you can also find a form to fill out if you want a certain or particular topic on a particular subject. If you want to actually come up on the show, be a formal guest, please go ahead, reach out. Thank you. Y'all enjoy. Have a blessed Saturday. Don't get too ripped. Don't get too slapped. But